The newest edition of Raising the Bar Live, where we teach you how to raise the bar in your benefits plan and make you a hero both to your budget and to your employees, which is a rare feat these days. So my guest today is Johnny Crowder, the CEO of CopeNotes, and really has quite a interesting perspective on mental health issues, how to engage, how to keep healthy, and how employers can help with that. And I think we're going to have a really interesting conversation today. Thank you so much for joining me today.
Of course. I've been looking forward to this.
It's been a while, right?
Yeah.
So, and there will be a replay. So if anybody's interested, we can replay this. And this mental health is such an important issue. I've been talking about it a lot more lately, and I've received a really good response from both our clients and other people in our orbit. When the manufacturers come to you and say, we have a mental health issue on our shop floor, the world really is incredibly overstressed. These are blue collar, mostly middle-aged men who just are very buttoned up in private. And when it's spilling out on that kind of workforce, there's a problem. I want to talk a little bit today. I think the relationship between an employer and the mental health of an employee is incredibly fraught. And I want to talk with you about how you address that and how you can help navigate that. And we'll be here a long time.
Yeah. Yeah. So in my experience, I've worked in, especially if we go towards like the blue collar route, before I ran CopeNotes, I worked in a warehouse, was working on appliances. So, I mean, the awareness level that my leadership had of what we were going through was zero. And at the time, I was dealing with severe depression, living with very pronounced symptoms of bipolar 1, schizophrenia, OCD. And there was if you quizzed my boss on who in the warehouse was struggling with anything, he would have just Christmas treed it. He would have had no clue. So I think you are right. Like the fact that we are in a position culturally where no matter what your type of workplace, that there's an awareness at the leadership level that something has to be done is refreshing. Part of me is like, where were you 20, 30 years ago? And part of me is like, well, the second best time to plant a tree is now,
Mm-hmm.
So I think one of the biggest fears that I hear from employers when I either go give a training or a keynote with a group or we're actually doing onboarding with CopeNotes, we always ask them like, what have you done in the past and why was it not enough? And we very regularly hear people say, we didn't know what to do and we didn't want to bring it up. Like there's this fear around, if I open up that whole can of worms, then what about liability? And then what do people expect me to do? And I think part of my job is telling employers the can of worms has been open for a long time.
Yep.
You are just now being introduced to it. And I think something I always want to tell employers is that it's not your job to go and individually counsel 5,000 of your employees. And I think even though it sounds ridiculous, that's where the fear resides.
Yes.
Is people
Yes.
going to come to me?
Mm-hmm.
I'm supposed to solve this, and I have to help them understand there's resources that you can equip your employees with. They don't expect you to do it for them,
Yes. And I'm going to throw this on you, and it's not such a common topic, but I was very surprised. An employer reached out to me and asked if we had any health resources for menopause, that was a rapidly growing requested benefit. And after I got over my shock that I was surprised by that, because I'm pretty aware of what's happening and what people are asking for, mostly because they come to ask me. That one I'd not heard, and I did some research on it before calling them back. And both physical, which is not your domain, but mental health, not as serious as bipolar 1 or schizophrenia or serious deep depression and anxiety, it affects the workplace.
Mm-hmm.
And at least people are asking. But the reason I asked that or brought that up is because as a woman of a certain age, it's a thing. And it does affect your physicality. And that's a small way, but every mental health issue affects physicality. Talk a little bit about that and what you see and how keeping people engaged and connected to their communities can help resolve some of that or alleviate it a little bit.
Yeah, something that I hear, so physical and mental health, it's so funny to talk about them like two separate things because
Yes,
I
it
always
can.
ask people, where is your brain located? If yours is inside of your body like mine is, then it is also physical health. So just like
Yeah.
heart health is not its own separate thing, it's part of physical
Mhm.
health because it's an organ. So the ways that this is most obvious to me is one of the primary causes of sleep loss is depression and anxiety. And then one of the most common causes of weight gain is sleep loss. And like everything, I'm telling you, everything touches everything. If you remember, I was with my nephew recently and we were going over the your knee bones connected to your, like that whole song. Truly, and I don't remember it, so don't quiz me. But truly, that's the way the brain is inside of the body. Like everything is connected, your
Mhm.
vision, your speech. And then if you consider there's been this huge resurgence in social connectedness being a very top priority and how loneliness is affecting our eating patterns, our sleep patterns, our screen time, and then literally poor interpersonal relationships in the workplace lead to all sorts of negative um, like business outcomes. So I always try to tell people when you're helping people cope with or work through depression or anxiety or stress or burnout, you're not just helping them in this one silo of their life that's in a vacuum, completely independent of everything. But by helping them there, you're seeing um, smoking cessation. You're seeing people drinking less. You're seeing people work out more and eat healthier and spend more time with their loved ones. Like all of these things drive outcomes in everything else. I always tell people, I always encourage people to work on their mental health because it's the one thing that enables all of the other corners
Mhm.
of health. Much like in the same way, anyone who has lived with chronic pain, who's listening right now, knows that chronic pain can seriously affect your moods, your outlook on the future. And there are many people who live with severe depression because they live with migraines.
Mhm.
And the learned helplessness of experiencing the migraine has caused a depressive season where they think, well, tomorrow it's going to hurt just as bad as today. And the next day it's going to hurt just as bad as tomorrow. That they're too connected for any employer to think, well, we don't need a mental health option because we have a physical health program, or the mental health is a nice to have, but the physical health is a have to have.
Yeah.
They're connected. They're too connected.
Does mental health affect mental acuity as well?
How do you mean?
Reasoning, logic, impulse control.
What's really funny that I'm glad that you asked this because in our we just did a quantitative study at CopeNotes that was published in the Journal of Mental Health, and one of the outcomes that we saw that we were not expecting was problem focused coping skills increased. So like problem solving skills
Mhm.
increased because we were addressing stress, anxiety, and depression. Anyone listening to this who has a psychology degree or even took psych classes in high school knows, like, of course I know why. So your body produces this stress hormone called cortisol when you're experiencing stress or anxiety, and this inhibits your decision-making capabilities. So the
Could you
less,
repeat that?
what's that?
Repeat that again.
Yes. So the more cortisol you have, the more of the stress hormone that you have coursing through your body and your brain, the less capable you are of making sound decisions. And the less stress hormone you have running through your system, the more capable you are of making, like, conducting critical analytical thought, making sound decisions. So it's the same as like the more alcohol you have in your system, the worse you are at decision making, and vice versa.
So we have a tendency in our family if somebody hits you verbally, you hit them back harder, which I think is not that uncommon. And, you know, you live a third of your life in your workplace. That shows up in your workplace. And I think that people don't realize that. And I suspect that if I understand that if I feel attacked, I'm going to attack you back, if it's just reflex, then all kinds of stuff happens. And that can be that kind of in the blue collar, on the machine floor, and it can be that office politic as well. Whereas if I understand that, then I'm one, maybe going to take you as you're not attacking me, you just have a different opinion, or you just did something that upset me in error or by accident, and that I can take a step back from that. Talk to me a little bit about how CopeNotes encourages community, lower stress, and how that plays out in the workplace, because I think you've got some good stories about that.
Yeah, so just for context, for anyone listening who's like, I don't even know what CopeNotes does, just in a sentence, so you have context, we send randomly timed text messages that interrupt negative thought patterns and train the brain to think healthier thoughts. So it's like a brain training tool, but all the messages, and this goes right into your point, the messages contain health education content, so psychology facts or journaling prompts and exercises, and some of these text messages literally ask you to actually one of our employees messaged me last week and said, hey, I got a text about choosing someone who had wronged me and forgiving them, like fully letting go of whatever it is that they did, no matter how long ago it was, and just being able to walk away, not carrying that anymore. And this employee said, I cried. I messaged this person and said, hey, we are all good. I totally forgive you. And this employee was like, I didn't even know that I needed that. I didn't even know how it was affecting the way that I communicated with people because I carried, because I had been wronged by this person. Now I'm guarded against all of these new people. So let's say, Allison, you say, oh, did it take you long enough to show up? If I was late for our call,
Yep.
if I interpret that through, oh, one time my leadership totally embarrassed me in front of the entire organization, and I've carried that for so long, I'm interpreting your comment through that lens, and then I carry something towards you for the rest of our working relationship. So it's very sticky, much like I know a lot of people on this call, if they're like, I don't do that. Let me ask you this. If you dated someone named Christine and they cheated on you, how likely are you to marry a Christine? Very, very, very unlikely. Very unlikely. So, and it's not conscious. You don't think, well, all people named Christine will cheat. And I'm just using that as a random name. I'm sorry if someone's listening whose name is Christine. But that like unconscious bias is something that affects all of our workplace relationships. It even affects our own ability to perform. So let's say I used to work with a leader who was very unconfident in my abilities. Then when I'm doing a task that reminds me of that situation, I underperform. I freeze because I'm stressed about it. So all of these things, we actually send messages asking people to challenge their assumptions of their relationships with other people and seek clarity in a relationship that feels tense. All of these things really impact workplace performance. But not only that, think about like the culture and the morale, like it changes the atmosphere of the workplace too.
Yes. And I that those are all very they're the culture things, right? The things that are really hard to implement can get shot apart really quickly, but keep people in your employ and help you hire people that you want to hire. Um, you've got some great case studies on your website, which I'm going to copenotes.com, for employers where you've implemented CopeNotes and you've had really good success, and with people that were very surprised you had good success.
Yes.
Because people are surprised, right?
Yeah, I think what we hear a lot is people say, well, we already have an EAP and nobody's using it. So why would
Yep.
somebody use CopeNotes?
Mm-hmm.
And to me now, and this is no shade towards EAPs, like there's a ton of value there. I think that the misconception on the employer side is because we have something and people aren't engaging with that, it must be because people don't need anything.
Correct.
So it's kind of like saying, imagine, I'll use an example that's real. So imagine you throw a party and you put out a bunch of pigs in a blanket, and half the people aren't touching them. And you're like, I guess nobody's hungry, when really half the people there are vegetarian and they cannot have pigs in a blanket. And now they're starving. And you figure, well, I shouldn't put out the veggie platter because if people were hungry, they'd be eating the pigs in a blanket. It's like, it's an understandable logical fallacy, but it's still a fallacy.
And I think it goes not just to EAP, but it goes to a lot of things that employers do for employees. I hear a lot, well, we do these things. Well, people forget, they have lives. They're
Oh,
busy.
yeah.
So the thing that I like so much about CopeNotes is that the employer, once it's set up, there needs to be an engagement campaign for people to opt in. That's the obligation for the employer, right? That's their obligation, and people are engaging on their own, but it is an outreach to an employee. It is not, and they don't have to reach out to you. And I'm just going to throw in there that for any benefit an employer has, there needs to be some outreach, at least to help people understand what to do the first couple of times. Otherwise, people don't know what to do. I mean, they don't care about benefits until they care about benefits.
Dude, so you're so calling me out right now. So this morning, I received an email from one of the county governments that we serve, one of our clients, and it said, "Hey, set up a new supplier portal in our new supplier vendor system or whatever." I swear they update these things, like they get a new system once a year, and we have to re-upload everything. So I logged into this new government portal for someone that we already serve, mind you. It's not some random group. And I'm logging in and I get to the page, and I'm fairly tech savvy. I get to the home page and I'm looking at this and I'm like, okay, where the heck do I start? There's no button that says like create now or get started. And then a little wizard pops up that's like, watch our tutorial. And I'm, even before I could consciously recognize that it popped up, I clicked it out. I was like, oh, I don't want to watch some onboarding thing. I'll figure it out myself. And I was like, what is that in me that literally needs help doing something? I'm presented with an option for help and I shoo it away. And I was like, I wish it would pop up again. I wish, because some people will say no to a resource the first time, will say no to a resource the second time. Maybe the third, the fourth, the fifth, the 10th, the 15th time, their life is saved by the resource that they said no thanks to early on. I think employers sometimes say, well, we leaned into the hallway and said, hey, there's a bunch of pigs in the blanket in the break room, and nobody came rushing in. But maybe it's the emails leading up to the party, letting them know, block out time on your calendar and come hungry because there's going to be food. Like, a big part of it is education leading up. And then a big reason why CopeNotes, when we launch with a new employer group, we do a live onboarding and training, like a lunch and learn or a webinar. We have hundreds and hundreds, sometimes thousands of employees on Zoom, and we're sharing, this is how your brain works. This is how CopeNotes works. This is how to redeem your subscription. And I think employers are most surprised when on day one, we have more people engaged with CopeNotes on the first day than have used their existing resources in years. And part of it is because of that education component. You really have to make it easy for people to engage.
I'm going to throw something else out there, and I'm sure I'm going to irritate some people, but that's okay. It has to be fun, or at least lively.
Yeah.
We're going to sit through another insurance thing, and we're going to, no. And that goes for any benefit too.
Oh, yeah.
Any benefit is, there at least has to be some engagement and some excitement and how this is going to help somebody. Let's go go back to talk about physical health. I'm in the health insurance business, and I see everything and I hear everything, right? I hear from insurance companies, I look at claims, I hear from senior level executives, I hear from HR executives, and I talk to people. I still talk to people because I found it's a very good way to understand how plans are working. And we do some pretty unique things, right? So we're asking people to engage in a different way in a healthcare system, not always, but sometimes. So I have to talk to people. And it is amazing to me how just a little bit of help will help those things smooth along. But also, when you make it easy to engage, and we do a lot with direct primary care, which can help with some kind of basic mental health anxiety, low level depression, but we see improvement in claims. We may see a little bit of a spike. We get more people going to the doctor, but we get people off long-term medications that way. We help people have a relationship with a doctor first, which is really challenging. Average time to get to see a physician now is 26 days. A friend of mine called me not too long ago crying. She could not see her doctor, this was in May, until the middle of July. She had an infection. Okay. I thought she's going to be dead in the middle of July. Um, but so we see that with people who are engaging in a claim system. But talk a little bit more about how people can use CopeNotes and what the impact of sleep is tremendous. How that affects every other area, because I think that's really important and incredibly under talked about.
Yeah, so to me, this all circles around stigma. And a lot of people think that stigma is just, what does Allison think of me? What do the people on LinkedIn watching this think of me? That is one component of stigma. For me in my personal life, a much more pervasive and limiting version of stigma that I faced is self-stigma,
Yep.
which is what I think about myself. So for example, if a narrative around going on a diet is I'm fat and I need to get healthy because I'm a slob, that impacts your willingness to stick to the diet or exercise plan or whatever. There's this idea in our heads, especially with mental health, where we say, if I use a mental health resource, what does that say about me? Am I crazy?
Mm-hmm.
Am I unstable? Am I broken? And all of these things lead people to consistently ignore
Mm-hmm.
their health issues and kick the can down the road. So something that I'm very passionate about that CopeNotes does is we reduce self-stigma and normalize help-seeking behaviors. And the third thing that health people listening will really care about, this third thing, is we increase the accuracy of your self-report. So let me just tell you what these three things are in a sentence each. Lowering your self-stigma is, well, yeah, I'll use a health resource. Doesn't mean there's anything wrong with me. I am taking care of my health, and that's actually a good thing. I'm being responsible. Normalizing help-seeking behaviors is very similar, only it begets other help-seeking behaviors. Like, you know what? Now that I'm using this mental health resource and I'm starting to take better care of myself, I should think about smoking less. Or I should think about working out a little more. I should talk to my doctor about my ankle. I haven't brought this up. I've met with him twice and haven't brought up my ankle. So there's the reduction of self-stigma. There's a normalization of help-seeking behaviors, which you can already picture in your head. Oh, claims, claims, claims. If you're realizing that people are being proactive about their health rather than reactive. But the third component is the accuracy of your self-report, which I can guarantee. So growing up, let me just say this. Growing up, the motto in my house was Crowders don't lie, cheat, or steal. We would say it all the time. And I grew up to be a liar. And how that manifested was, Allison, you ask me how I'm doing, and I say, I'm good.
Mm-hmm.
I'm good. I'm good. Living the dream. I'm lying. My accuracy, the accuracy of my self-report, me telling you how I feel, is inaccurate. So what we see in health systems is claims are really high and costs are really high. and outcomes are really low because people are not being honest about what their actual lived experience is. And it's not always because they're lying on purpose to deceive or anything, but it's because there's a level of denial. It's, well, my ankle will feel better later, or lots of people's ankles feel this way. But increasing the accuracy of one's self-report through journaling, through health education, will help people be like, I feel like what I'm experiencing is not normal and I should do something about it.
Is that item number 2, that seeking other help issues, is that subconscious? Like, people don't realize that that's happening?
Well, I think they actually did some study, I can't remember when it was, but it was something about how people eat when they start working out. And it's almost like people they sometimes will eat more junk food at first because they're like, oh, I'm working out, I deserve it. And then actually, over time, they start thinking, well, I just worked out, I don't want to eat a big bowl of ice cream afterwards and undo all that hard work I did. So actually, their health behaviors compound because they start living in the narrative. If I'm the type of person who went to lift weights today, I'm also the type of person who can have chicken breast and broccoli for dinner. And not that you have to have that every day, but you know what I mean. They kind of build on each other naturally because the narrative, the identity is shifting from I'm the type of person who doesn't focus too much on that to I'm the type of person who prioritizes my health. What does that type of person do?
Yes. And I think that they do compound, but it is an unconscious kind of, that's just my observation. But that, oh, well, I don't need to do that, I can do this instead. But I think that identity shift is very important, and it's also, people can only do that themselves. Nobody else can do that for them.
Yeah, I was just at dinner with a good friend of mine, Carrie, and we were at this seafood restaurant, and I am really bad with ordering sides. Like the sides, because think about it, the best looking sides are like truffle fries or bacon mac and cheese or whatever. And I bit the bullet when we went out to dinner the other night, and I got broccoli as a side. And I was like, what am I doing? Who does this? Who on earth orders broccoli as a side? But I remember thinking, if I am the type of person who, and this wasn't for this conversation, this is just an example of this happening in my own life. I'm like, if I'm the type of person who prioritizes eating well at home, why would I not prioritize it when I'm at a restaurant? And it was like, this stuff, like you said, it's not like I'm making a decision. It's like, dude, if you're this person, do the thing that that person would do, you know?
Yes. So what is the most important thing for employers to consider when they are trying to provide resources, help with the issues that are popping up in their workplaces? Because if they were not productivity, financial, recruitment, retention issues, there would be no discussion.
Yeah.
But they are.
Yeah, I would probably say one thing that doesn't need repeating and then one that does. So one thing that I think I want to repeat, even though a lot of people know it, is just because you have existing resources doesn't, and people aren't really using them, doesn't mean that they're not interested in other resources. I think that's understandable, but illogical. And that's also true for if you already have resources and people are using them, you say, well, we don't need any more because they're already using this thing, and you're not remembering that. Anyway, so that's part of it, and everybody already knows that. That's not new. I think something that came up recently that I want to address here is if you are in leadership and you are making decisions for your employee base, and I don't mean this to come off as harsh or anything, but just because you don't like it doesn't mean it won't help your people. So
Correct.
I've met with leaders who say, well, I don't need a mental health resource. I mean, I'm just fine, and look at all the stress I'm under. So if I don't need a mental health resource, then why?
Nobody else does either.
And even we've had people say, well, yeah, I used CopeNotes and it was cool, but I don't really need something like that. And I think, are we here to consult you and your own personal battles, or are we here on behalf of 5,000 people who can benefit from support? And right there on the homepage of our website, it says 86% of users report improved mental health in 30 days. And I think to myself, you might be one of the 14% who doesn't see that initial, like, wow, this is really helping me. But I always tell people, don't allow the 14% to make the decision to
For the
withhold the
86.
support from the 86%. Like, trust me, if you brought me a pop playlist, and for context, anyone who doesn't know me, I play in a metal band. I've done that for years. I'm a huge metalhead. If you brought me a pop playlist and you were like, this is going to be really good for your party, I would say, I don't listen to pop. But the odds are, if I have a party, not everybody wants to listen to death metal. So I need to be considerate of the people that I'm supporting and serving. And I think while there's good intentions at the top in leadership, we sometimes allow our personal biases to get in the way of providing support to people who could really benefit from it. And my encouragement is, if you don't need a resource, first of all, that's great. Second of all, consider using one anyway. And the third thing is, just because you don't need a resource or find a resource valuable, and this is not just CopeNotes, this is any resource, please consider that the people that you're supporting might actually really benefit from it.
I think we'll leave it there. Thank you very much. For those of you that are listening or watching the replay, thank you for joining us today. Leave any comments below. And this is the middle of June. Renewal season is coming up. We're starting to get busy already. So I would encourage you, look at your notes from last year. What went well? What didn't go well? What do you want to accomplish this year? And start that planning so you don't get forced into last minute decision making, which never works well for anyone. And if you want to check the status of your plan, we have a plan grading tool. We'll drop a link to that in the notes as well. Have a terrific rest of your day, everybody. Thank you, John.